Capitalism is an economic system in which private individuals or businesses own capital goods. At the same time, business owners, capitalists, employ workers, labor, who only receive wages. Labor does not own the means of production but only uses them on behalf of the owners of capital. In a capitalist country, the focus is on profits over anything else. In a socialist country, the public is seen to be more important, and social welfare is a major priority. Today, most countries practice a mixed capitalist system that includes some degree of government regulation of business and ownership of select industries. Capitalism developed historically out of previous systems of feudalism and mercantilism in Europe, and dramatically expanded industrialization and the large-scale availability of mass-market consumer goods. Capitalism grew out of European feudalism. Up until the 12th century, a very small percentage of the population of Europe lived in towns. Skilled workers lived in the city but received their keep from feudal lords rather than a real wage, and most workers were serfs for landed nobles. However, by the late Middle Ages, rising urbanism, with cities as centers of industry and trade, become more and more economically important. Karl Marx was famously critical of the capitalist system of production because he saw it as an engine for creating social ills, massive inequalities, and self-destructive tendencies. Marx argued that, over time, capitalist businesses would drive one another out of business through fierce competition, while at the same time the laboring class would swell and begin to resent their unfair conditions. His solution was socialism, whereby the means of production would be handed over to the laboring class in an egalitarian fashion. In this system, production would take place via organizations like worker cooperatives, with profits shared equitably among all employed. Workers, however, do not have any claim on the means of production nor on the profits generated from their labor. These belong to the capitalists. In other words, in capitalism, the rich get richer, and the poor get poorer, such is the ever-turning gyre of capitalism. Indeed, contemporary economists, such as Thomas Piketty and Joseph Stiglitz, suggest increasing inequality could endanger our future. As an economic system, one of the effects of capitalism is that it breeds competition between countries and perpetuates poverty among developing nations due to the individual interests of private corporations rather than the needs of their workers. This leads to certain nations having higher rates of poverty and joblessness, which negatively impacts their economy, environment and population. What kind of culture or country is it which pushes distraction, in its ordinary selection even of news, to the point where there is hardly any sustained discussion of the central and interlocking issues of human survival? Human extinction is a real possibility in some serious scientific scenarios. Topic of climate change is arguably the biggest issue of our or any time. There's no democracy, common good, equality and social justice on a dead planet. In a global capitalist system, every place is for ransacking and conquest, every place for potential expansion and exploitation. Place becomes commodified, a thing to be acquired, serving the interests of the corporations and the very rich. And as lands get destroyed by imperialistic wars, climate crisis brought about by plundering through extraction and devastating pollution of waters, earth and air, and massive unemployment brought about globalization, more people are forced to flee in search of safe ground and jobs.
Global capitalism not only escalates a mass exodus from place, it relies on it. When people are separated from their homes, from their bases, families, from their grounding in culture, farms, their rivers, their tradition, community, and continuity, they are destabilized, vulnerable to exploitation, oppression, death, and tyranny.
Why is capitalism harmful? Because of how it is structured, capitalism will always pit business owners and investors, capitalists, against the working class. Capitalists are in competition against one another, and so will seek to increase their profits by cutting costs, including labor costs. At the same time, workers want to see higher wages, fairer treatment, and better working conditions. These two incentives are fundamentally at odds with one another. This creates class conflict, inequalities, and misery among the working class. Capitalism also produces negative externalities that can harm the environment and people's health and incentivizes cronyism and other bad behavior. While capitalists enjoy the potential for high profits, workers are exploited for their labor, with wages always kept lower than the true value of the work being done. Unemployment is another symptom of capitalism, where unproductive workers are left out of the labor force or replaced by technological advancements or inventions. This creates a struggle between the working class and the capitalist class, where workers fight for better conditions, fairer wages, and greater dignity. If we look on map, we can confirm our explanation of social inequality. According to calculation, average minimum net wage per month in EU member states is €990. Countries, who are geographically part of Europe, but not yet part of EU member states, and if we add countries in EU member states, minimum net wage per month is €848. For comparison, minimum average net wage in countries such as Brazil is €225, Australia €500, Colombia €255, USA €1061, China €248 and Russia €242. Another drawback of capitalism is that it often leads to a host of negative externalities, such as air and noise pollution. Negative externalities are costs paid for by society and not the producer of the externality. A factory dumping waste into a river or emitting smoke into the air is a problem shouldered by the communities that the factory is in, and not the business itself. Competition between capitals compels investors to constantly seek new profitable markets, raw materials, energy sources, labor power, transport routes, political environments, and technologies in every corner of the world. As consequence, livable ecology will be slowly destroyed. If I mention just a few examples, forests must be razed, lakes and rivers must be poisoned, sustainable local agriculture must be trumped by mass chemical farming to feed animals for slaughter, fertile soil must be raped to make way for carbon-spewing trucks, cars, and airports and soulless real estate developments, indigenous people must be removed and defeated to carry out toxic mining and drilling operations, politicians must be bought to prevent government interference with the endless commodification of the planet and its species. Arctic ice must be seen as an opportunity for new shipping lanes. Another capitalist war is current inter-imperialist US-Russia proxy war underway in Ukraine. The Ukraine war finds its natural place in capitalist madness. One outcome of Putin's criminal aggression and the consequent sanctions regime is to restrict the fossil fuel flow from Russia on which Europe relies, particularly the German-based system that is its economic powerhouse. Economic consequences for Europe are severe, though not for the US, which is largely immune and profiting handsomely. Europe is seeking alternative sources of oil and gas, a bonanza for the US. Fossil fuel industry, rewarded with new markets and expansive drilling opportunities to enable it to destroy life on Earth more effectively. The giant U.S. capitalist global military empire called NATO, with roughly 40,000 soldiers on Europe's border with Russia, military soldiers has the largest carbon footprint of any single institution on Earth. It may soon be setting new carbon emissions records in a deadly war over Taiwan with state capitalist China. Thanks to how the war in Ukraine has deepened the dangers of both nuclear war and climate catastrophe, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has just moved its doomsday clock to 90 seconds to midnight, its highest level in history. Capitalism has so construed the market that humans interact agonistically. All of us, winners and losers, consumers and excluded, compete for resources, for market share, for a living wage, for a job, for the time for friendship and family, for inclusion in the market, and so forth. Capitalism is wrong, not simply on the grounds of what it fails to do but because of what it succeeds in doing, distorting human desire and relations. What kind of culture is it which pushes distraction, in its ordinary selection even of news, to the point where there is hardly any sustained discussion of the central and interlocking issues of human survival? What kind of culture does that? A capitalist culture.